Welcome to your awakening. Please stay calm as your reality is adjusted.
Get the headset back on quick. And we done with that one. Close that window. Welcome to your awakening. Why is the camera not working now? I have no idea. Let's try that again. Is it going to come back on? Wait, no, it's back again. Terrible quality, grainy, bad lighting camera is back on again. How fantastic. Yes, welcome, folks, to another episode. Did I share it? I bet I forgot to share it again. I'll try and multitask that while I'm talking. Yeah, welcome back to another edition, another episode, podcast, broadcast show of Excalibre on this moon day evening of the 24th of the 9th, 2018, 24th of September. Select that one and share that. Yes, just a couple of minutes past the 8:30 time. I was rushing to click the button while we were chatting about decent movies to watch about AI. A movie called Automata. If you haven't seen that one, it's worth watching. If you're interested in that subject, right, okay, I've done my share thing, so now I can concentrate better. I'm not very good at multitasking. I just find it too distracting. I'd rather concentrate on one thing at a time, or a few things at a time. Anyway, yes, welcome back. Welcome to your awakening. I can see the broadcast going. Yeah, this week, this episode, I will get into doing my usual thing of trying to explain the title. Blame the Who's. Blame the Who's. And the subtitle, cultability. Yeah, I'll come back to that in a bit. Hopefully I will remember to explain everything the way I was thinking about it. I was always noting it all down. Got my notes open so I can look at them, and I've got the chat room open. Hello to everyone in the chat room. Thanks for joining in. Simon Boyle, hello. And Barry Tagoose, hello. That's Gary and Peter are in the room. So hello. I know probably quite a few people are watching Raconteur News at the moment, or have been watching. I did tune in for a little bit earlier, but then I was setting this up and getting things ready for now. So I couldn't listen to all of it, but they were talking about some good stuff, talking with a guy called Paul about his experiences and his knowledge about using more natural ways to deal with your health. That's just like the main topic they were talking about. There's lots of other good stuff in there as well. So interesting stuff. If you weren't listening to it, go and check it out. Raconteur News. I'm sure you can watch it back on the video, because they're probably winding up towards the end of their show soon. Anyway, yes. So I'll get on with my thing, and as people turn up, they turn up. One other thing that I note different about this week and last week, I've been trying, starting last week. I've done it once or twice before, just out of curiosity to see how things go. But this week I've tried not putting the what's it called, the adult warning or on the beginning of the video or on the broadcast itself. When you create or when you set up a broadcast for YouTube, you can select it to have the over 18 warning or adults only warning at the beginning. That and the viewable ratings. In other words, whether you can or can't see the thumbs up and thumbs down. if I can find my right page to show you. Oh, if I could click on things. I'll do a quick screen share of this. I mean, this is, how can I put it? Sort of like background stuff that goes on in this environment. That one, screen share. Background stuff that goes on in this environment of YouTube broadcasting and doing videos where you're talking about the kind of stuff that I often talk about: global affairs, reality, loads of various topics. But if you want to do this kind of stuff, if you're interested in doing this kind of thing, if you do it, you see this kind of background information or background generality of stuff that goes on in this environment. The networks and individuals that move around in this ocean of the internet for various reasons, doing their thing for whatever their reasons are. I've spoken many times about the multi-channel networks, as well as the groups of individuals that do it for some propaganda reason, like they're trying to promote their own political party or their favoured political party or their religious point of view or whatever. Call them propagandists, I suppose, is the easiest way to describe it. But this kind of stuff is constantly going on in the background. But the reason I wanted to show it, I mentioned it a while ago, is when I do a broadcast that is age restricted, you can see it there on the screen, age restricted. So it puts up a little warning at the beginning of the video. And as far as I know, it also means people have to be logged in to their YouTube or their Google account, because that's how Google knows whether you are underage or the age required to get past that warning. So it's a way of making sure that people who turn up in your chat room are using an account that Google knows about. It's not one that they've just made up 5 minutes ago, things like that. But normally I do a broadcast with that activated, and I normally have the thumbs, the interaction hidden from view. I started doing that deliberately as a little experimentation to see how it would affect those propagandists that would turn up to try and interact with the video or influence others that were looking at the video. So commonly, a common tactic is to use that kind of public influence. In other words, playing on people's fear of what others think about them and their ideas or their way of life or whatever. That fear of ostracization means that the manipulators, the propagandists, will come along and they'll spam the thumb up on something they like, or they will spam the thumb down on something they want to scare the public away from. So you have a little track of the number that goes along with each one. And whenever I've got the views hidden, it averages 1. Sometimes there's 2. And very occasionally there might be a 3, but that could be going back like a year or more. But they average 1. There's one person out there who loves to continuously turn up and click the thumb down. That makes their life complete. But that is the average 1. Whenever I turn that age restriction off, and especially when I also make the interactions visible to the public, they turn up and they average 6. There's a couple of others that go back quite a while. I think the little video clip I had of me dancing, celebrating the death of Margaret Thatcher, that had a similar effect, because when I re-uploaded that after Google decided to restrict it on a copyright claim because of I was using the music from The Wizard of Oz, Ding Dong, the Witch is Dead. So they hit it with a copyright hit. So I just changed the music, put it back up again, re-uploaded it. And lo and behold, there was something like 6 thumbs down. It's almost as if the one person that follows me around has 5 additional sock accounts that whenever they get the opportunity to utilize those sock accounts, because the video is not age restricted, forcing them to use a singular registered account, they can bring in their sock accounts and then spam, thumb. So that's, I mean, my numbers in this kind of respect are minuscule compared to what you will see happen on some of the bigger channels, or channels that are particularly targeted, or individuals that are particularly targeted by some group out there that does this kind of shit. Yeah. So I wanted to sort of say this in this broadcast, because I did it last week and I thought I'll do it again this week and actually let everybody know why I'm doing it this way, and why I'm showing this, because camera works again. Because most of the time, if not the majority of the time, the best way to deal with these kind of interactions is to bring them out into the light. Because one of the manipulator's favorite tactics is to do things in the shadows. Yeah, that's where they work. That's where they operate. That's the occulted manipulations that they like to make use of with their flashy camera, because it struggles with the light changes. Stop it. But yeah, they work in the shadows. So they like to do things in the background. So they like to send people private messages to tell them stuff. They like to manipulate things from behind the disguise of a sock account, so that they can then deny all knowledge of what they were doing. Like trolling people and shit like that. That is quite relevant at the moment with a lot of the things that are happening, that for me and what I'm doing in this environment are very relevant, because obviously it could affect whether I can carry on doing this, whether my ability to speak publicly gets restricted and shit like that. So it's relevant to me, but it's not just from my biased point of view that I'm saying this. It's now become hopefully apparent enough for people in general, the general public, to now realize that this stuff is all very relevant to them as well. The ongoing increasing amount of censorship, or the acquiescing to and installing of the infrastructure required to do so. You may not find your voice being restricted at the moment, but if you keep agreeing with this progression of the infrastructure, then sooner or later you will find yourself subject to it. Because as you keep giving them more power to do this kind of shit, they'll keep taking that power and they will make use of it at some point. So at some point you're going to say the wrong thing, or say it in the wrong way, use the wrong words when you're trying to put something in writing or verbally or whatever, and lo and behold, ka-chunk, you will find yourself subject to that censorship infrastructure. So I think it's relevant to sort of, from my point of view, it then becomes relevant to point at stuff and go, here you go, folks. Here's a very simplistic, low number example of what you can see of the methodology that is applied even to the bigger groups and channels out there. Yeah, they're going to be subject to this kind of stuff constantly, more so if they have a big channel that has a potentially big influence on a large demographic of the public. In other words, the more people they can reach and therefore potentially influence, that's going to attract more pressure against them using these kind of methods. When you remove the age restriction, it opens up the possibility for those kind of manipulators to come in and try and mess with what you're doing. Part of the reason as well that I turned the viewable ratings off in the first place was to make a point that this is not about me trying to create a cult of personality. I'm not trying to get people to validate me by giving me lots of praise, by giving me lots of thumbs ups that I then display to the rest of the public to go, see, look, people do like me. Look at all the thumbs up I'm getting. I didn't want that. I wanted people to listen to what I was saying and evaluate what I was saying, the content of the information or the ideas that I was trying to put across. You know, this is not about displaying to others that kind of tribalistic need to be included in a group. So I'm very grateful for the people that did still click the thumbs up, because it let me personally know that they're there and they like what I'm doing, they appreciate what I'm doing, etc. Yeah. But they did that with the knowledge that their particular interaction would not be visible to the rest of the public. So even better. You know, that to me, that was them participating in that way. It's not about displaying to everybody that I'm in the right group. You know, I'm one of the chosen ones or one of the special ones. I'm in the know, all that kind of shit that gets constantly used by the system, the usurpers, controllers, to reinforce their domination over the general populace. You're not allowed to stand out from the crowd. You're not allowed to be different. You have to fit in. You have to be one of the sheep. You have to fall into the flock in some manner. And you have to constantly revalidate that with everybody else that's around you. That's part of the reason why the sheep bleat to each other. It's reassurance. Hello, I'm a sheep. Are you a sheep? Yes, hello, I'm a sheep as well. We're all sheep. Isn't being sheep great? It is that kind of reinforcement of the validation based on the justification that's been given to them by an outside authority. The outside authority pats you on the head and says you're a good little doggy because you're conforming to the requirements. You fit into the blueprint. Well done. Have a chucky drop. Yes, as Gary's put in the chat, group affirmation. Yes, exactly right. So you're probably wondering, what's that got to do with the title of this particular episode? But it does connect back to some of the stuff that I was talking about last week, and I wanted to extend on that and get into talking about flashy camera. Sorry, talking about culpability and how I know a lot of well, certainly some of the things, maybe not a lot of, but some of the things that I was mentioning or talking around last week can and often are used as justification of why the system in particular, I'm pointing primarily at that monopolistic behemoth that I refer to as the system, but it also applies to other, smaller versions, franchises, you could say, like the cults of personality. They are a franchise of the system itself, a fractal franchise of the system's own infrastructure and methodology. But yeah, some of the stuff I was talking about last week about that kind of, referring to the potential God being or creator energy, whatever you want to label it as, but that other, that outside other that can often be referred to as kind of like a get out clause, a justification of I don't have to worry about all these trolls because I know that in a future life they'll get their comeuppance. Karma will deal with them at some point in the future. It can and often is used as a get out clause to appeal to some otherworldly thing or energy or being or whatever as some kind of excuse mechanism. So I wanted to sort of dig into that a bit more. And this, as the week has gone on, thinking about that and thinking about the situation, like I showed on the screen share, isn't it funny how when I remove that requirement of people using a recognized account, all of a sudden all the spam bots come out? Coincidence? I think not. But some of the questions that have sort of, or points of view, ideas, whatever, talking points that have gone on across the week. Things to do with Trump and his accusations. They're still continuing this machine of rolling out these constant questions and doubts and accusations, etc., etc. It's all theatre show as far as I'm concerned, but still it's theatre that has an influence on day-to-day life and potentially affects people's well-being and health and prosperity, etc. So it's relevant. Even though it's theatre, it has an influence on everyday life. So that got me thinking more in the question of like, well, where's the culpability of what is going on with those kind of situations? And that linking into, as I say, some of the things I was talking about on last week's show that are often used as the excuse for that culpability. So, you can't blame me, God made me do it. Oh, you can't blame me, the devil made me do it. Where's the culpability? Where's the responsibility for actions taken? That's what really culpability means, isn't it? You are the one that is responsible for the actions that caused the thing in question. So you're culpable as the initiator, the cause of those events or whatever it is that happen. So blame the who's. Hopefully that would, for a lot of people out there, I think it probably has, conjured up straight away the use of words that would remind them of something that sounds very similar to whose is another word that is the Jews. So blame the whos. Hang on, mate, did you say blame the Jews? He's like, no, I said blame the whos. Yeah. And just so that people don't waste their time, please do not think that this episode is going to be all about me targeting the Jewish people, the Hebrew people, whatever. And it also, this is not going to be about me making some kind of laundry list of names and addresses of people who are to blame, that kind of shit. No, nothing like that, sorry. This is, like I usually do, talking about concepts and ideas, philosophical points of view, and questions, things like that. Not a laundry list of the usual suspects. Put Benjamin Netanyahu in the top 10. There you go. That'll keep you happy for a little bit, maybe. But yeah, blame the who's. So to try and explain, hopefully some of the stuff I've already said sort of explains why I was putting that title in and why I decided to put blame the who's, because I knew it would conjure that image for many people, or that maybe you could describe it as phonetic imagery, auditory, because it's based on when you hear a sound and you're not quite sure, did you hear that correctly? Did he say Jews or did he say who's? And the biases within your own head, where sometimes you'll hear something and you assume what was said. So you thought I said Jews, whereas I didn't. I said who's. I didn't misspeak. I clearly spake. So your own bias made your brain take what you heard and go, oh, he's just said Jews. No, I didn't. But it links into the cultability as well. That camera's going to really annoy me, so I'm going to stick a screen share up for a little bit, and hopefully it will settle down for a bit. Entertain yourself for 2 seconds. Just want to find a picture. That one will do. It's somewhat appropriate. Right, there you go, camera. Now you can stop flashing at me. So let me look at my notes and find me footsteps. Hello to people in the chat. I'll just have a quick hello, because I've noticed more people in the chat turning up. Andy Manchester, hello. And Steve to Goose, hello mate. I watched your show on Saturday night. It was another good one. So the music was good, and the audio quality you had was absolutely brilliant, mate. Really spot on. Greer Louise, hello Greer, I hope you're well. And Dots, the artist formerly known as a non-violent extremist, hello mate. Got some Tatro, hello, hello. Dave Iron, hello. And James Owen, hello, mate. Thanks for sharing it. Sharing the link round. Right, scroll back down to the bottom. Okay, I'm going to dig into my notes. So, blame the who's. Hopefully, as well, it's going to be pretty obvious to most people that in that wordage, in that sentence, even though I've sort of jiggled it around a bit, I'm basically saying, who's to blame? Blame the who. Who are you blaming? Where does the blame lie? Where does the culpability land? Yeah, where's the end of that chain of cause and effect? So who's to blame? And one of the most common, certainly become, I think, the most common response to that, or certainly one of the ones that gets a hell of a lot of propaganda at the moment, is yourself. Who's to blame? You're to blame. It's your own stupid fault. You'll hear that quite often. Certainly in the mainstream, you'll hear it quite a lot. And as the tendrils of the mainstream dig into this supposedly alternative environment, the alternative media environment, whatever, this internet environment of media, you'll still hear that same refrain, and you'll also be able to see, witness, hear, read how that principle is twisted to create a feedback loop that pushes people into a little narcissistic bubble of you're the one to blame, it's all your responsibility, because don't you know quantum physics means you create your own reality, therefore all the shit exists in the world because of you, it's your fault, you have to change yourself, you have to be a better person, you have to take up this new age church spirituality to become the new butterfly and transform yourself into the perfect angelic being, because that's the only way you'll ever stop all the evil that's happening, because it's your fault. Hopefully you get my emphasis on the it's your fault part of this propaganda that they push constantly. And it has for a number of decades now been formed into, one of the forms that is pushed into is what I refer to as the New Age Church. I'm not talking about a lot of the knowledge, a lot of the information, the comprehension, the perceptions that often get lumped into that title of being New Age or spirituality. That is done deliberately by the system to muddy the waters and pollute knowledge and distract and misdirect people away from good information that is actually beneficial to them. Yeah, but you have this, what has become a commercial entity that I often refer to as the New Age Church. And that is, it's just like any other religious system that requires just your obedient belief and not your questions. You're just supposed to agree with, believe, and buy the product. Buy yourself a little crystal and chant on a full moon and stuff like that, to summon the magic energies to cure the world and all that kind of stuff. It gets very diluted and commodified and simplified to such a point that it just becomes, as it's meant to, a distraction from the actual truth of that information. It gives people a feel-good effect, which eases their angst against the shit that is happening in their own lives or in the world around them that they concerns them, such that they go looking for answers to the problems and they find this narcissistic bubble world that feeds into that self-fulfilling prophecy of, I want to feel better because looking at the world makes me feel sad. So I chant a little mantra and I burn some sage and I feel better about myself now because I've cured the world of its ills. It's abdication of responsibility, and also in that in and of itself is a misdirection, because as I stressed earlier, the propaganda is trying to convince you that it is your fault. So that, alleviating of your own angst is a little bit like masturbation. It's self-gratification to feel better about something that wasn't your fault in the first place. So why are you feeling bad about it if you're not the one responsible for causing those things, causing those problems? So I think it is one of the biggest ones, and why I put it right at the top of my little list, right at the beginning. Who's to blame? Yourself. But I will come back to it later on, and hopefully it will make sense why I come back to it. Or I will make it make sense. So, who could you put the blame on next? What about your parents or your family in general? Or maybe you didn't have a family. Maybe you lost your family when you were young, such that you don't ever remember them. You grew up in an adoptive family or in the care system or something like that. So you would possibly blame them, blame your family for certain aspects of your life because of that. In the same way as with that pointing at yourself kind of misdirection, the system is often quite happy to tell you that the reason you're experiencing a lot of stress or hardship in your life is because your family were absolute bastards. They treated you horribly. They didn't bring you up correctly the way we know that we should do now. You should have been brought up as a genderless zebra. And if your parents brought you up in that kind of traditional value system of male and female, husband and wife, etc., oh no, that was wrong. That was they were oppressing you. They were abusing you. So therefore, they're to blame for all your problems in life. Why is it you don't want to have your dick chopped off and become a transsexual? Is it because your parents imbued in you a sense of biological truth such that you know that would be a mistake? But why then do you feel so depressed and upset with yourself? Is it because we're constantly bombarding you with this propaganda that says you ought to cut your own dick off? I wonder. So, parents, family, often a good one that is commonly referred to as being the point of blame, where the responsibility lies. And hopefully, people will have the ability to realize that I'm being somewhat open with what I'm listing here, as in, obviously, there are counterpoints to these things that I'm saying. There can be, there often is for many people, an element of truth to problems within your own life stemming from experiences of your childhood life with your parents, your family, etc. Yeah, that can be true for many people. Very often, I feel anyway, from my own experience, it's very often true that a lot of the angst that people experience when they start to see this system for what it is because of some of the experiences they've had with their own family. So there is a fractal reflection of the family unit to the pseudo family unit that is the system as it likes to manipulate us, to farm us. It likes to view us all as little children. That's why it claims this right to care, or the need to care for its citizenry. Like you're all children of the Queen. She has to look after you like you're all little infants that don't know better for yourself. Yeah. So there is a truth to it, but please, I'm doing this from the point of view of I have confidence that people listening, people watching, can think that stuff for themselves. They don't need me to constantly list every potential caveat or counterpoint. Otherwise, it gets a bit ridiculous after a while. Next on my list, who's to blame for why you feel the angst that you feel, or feel a need to fix the world in some fashion? Well, what about the trolls and the bullies? Trolls basically are just bullies. I'm using the word troll here to represent the demographic of people that are not connected into some kind of other structure that is influencing them to do what they do. They do it just because, like any other bully, they have a sadistic need within their personality to externalize onto others their own inner conflicts. And that can often lead, bullying and trollism, being a troll, can be infectious. Bullies encourage other bullies. You very rarely, well, in my school experience, I never encountered a bully who was a bully unto himself. Because usually what you found is when you got them on their own, their real selves would come out and they would be scared shitless that you would kick the fuck out of them because they no longer have their group affirmation support group around them. Bullies feed off the group mentality. Bullies, trolls rely on that group tribalistic mentality, that affirmation from the group. It creates a feedback loop that makes them do what they do most of the time. Again, the counterpoint to this is, yes, in life there are some truly sadistic people, psychopathic people that do this from their own selves. They don't need a support group to encourage them to do it. But in general, with the mass of the populace, people get into that kind of personality, habitual way of being because of a group feedback loop effect. They egg each other on. Who can be the nastiest? Who can say the most appalling thing to somebody? And now, with the internet the way it is, it even extends to the point of, how could I put it, suicide clubs, where people will compete with each other to cause somebody that they are harassing online to actually commit suicide. That's how bad that kind of group mentality effect can become. And our modern society of this, like on the screen share, like it says, modern society based around this technological social media popularism is exacerbating that effect. It's actively encouraging it, such that people are being forced further and further into an individuated narcissistic bubble where if something doesn't make them feel ejaculatory, if they're not feeling the most absolute joy that they're supposed to get out of life according to all the adverts, then they extract that frustration on all those around them. So they become sadistic and psychopathic in their interactions with others because those others are not fulfilling their supposed needs that have been told to them by this system. Where's your house? Where's your car? Where's your whatever that you're supposed to have in this modern society? Oh, you don't have one. Oh, then you're not part of the group, are you? That means I can happily attack you, and all my other group-minded fellows around me would encourage me and slap me on the back for doing so. I think that's enough on that point. Hopefully people get the idea. All right, let's move on to something similar because it is connected into that, and that's who to blame. Blame the immigrants. I thought this was quite appropriate because it does it extends further from that kind of group mentality, because nationalistically, the tribal differences between social groups are where that kind of friction occurs, because people don't want foreigners coming in and taking our women and taking our jobs. They took our jobs. So I thought it was very relevant as well at the moment with all the stuff about Brexit and the European Union and the white genocide, the tsunami wave of foreigners that are being sent here to take us over, etc., etc. Who's to blame in that situation? Yeah. I'll leave that as an open question. But I thought, immigrants, the Brexit situation, I think you could potentially quite easily see how that connects in with the trolls and bullies and that kind of groupthink tribalism. And who's to blame, really? Is it those people that are moving around the planet, or is the root of that cause and effect further away than just those people? Deeper than the people themselves. Something else is driving them in the direction that people are complaining about. So that I felt as I was writing my notes out, that brings us to it's that question of the influence of others. Who's to blame? Well, are you to blame, or were you just influenced by other people? Were you influenced by somebody who speaks with authority? Somebody who talks with an air as if they've got some kind of knowledge or experience or ability, an air of authority? Did that influence you? And it was their influence that is the culpable point. Wasn't you that did it. Oh no, it wasn't me that pulled the trigger. I only pulled the trigger because that guy in a uniform over there told me to. So you had a choice. He told you to do something. You were presented with a choice. You decided to do the thing that you did. So where's the culpability? Who's to blame? Is it the other person for influencing you? Or was it you yourself because you're the one that actually took the action? You're the one that initiated the word into physicality. The question of Joan of Arc, was it the voice of God, or was it just her own imagination? Was she just self-justifying her desire? Because the whole story, when you look at it, is quite nationalistic. It's very tribalistic. So was she just self-justifying her desire to rid her country of people that she considered to be foreign invaders, the enemy? Or was she actually hearing a voice in her head? Could she have been schizophrenic even, Really, my point is that the influence of others. At what point do you take back your own authority and go, hang on, well, I hear what you're saying, what you're shouting at me, mate. You who's wearing that costume with the symbols on it, and, you look like you're supposed to know what you're doing. You have that air of authority, but you're telling me to do something that I don't feel is the right thing to do. So no, I'll take back my own authority. I'm not going to pull that trigger. At what point does influence by others become vacuous, meaningless? Some of these things I'm going to mention, I'm not digging deeply into each one. I want them to add together towards a completion. So I might leave things somewhat open, like an open question kind of thing, and just move on. And doing so, part of what I've just said, that influence of others, I feel very nicely brings us to the cult of personality. And this is something where, when it comes to talking about the system or any structure of external authority, or something that claims some kind of external authority, think of any governmental system, it's a thing, a metaphysical thing. It doesn't exist in and of itself. It's just a concept. But that very concept is used as the basis, the foundation and justification for things that happen in a very physical sense. So the government claims a justification from some ephemeral conceptual thing, and in doing so, they then enact physical things to happen. And the cult of personality is a really good sort of microcosm example of that principle. You believing somebody being so up on a pedestal, so untouchable, so perfect, or even divine. I know a lot of people don't like this. Certainly, a lot of the demographics that can often turn up in this environment of supposed alternative media, conspiracy genre, truth movement, whatever you want to call it, this kind of area of the internet, and in particular YouTube. There's a lot of people that come from that Christian Bible Belt demographic, to the point that when I refer to things, or when I bring up the concept or the questions of how, for example, Jesus Christ is a cult of personality for many people, because it has been molded into the very concept itself, whether he really existed or not, just treating it as a concept or a chunk of information, a logos of information and perception, perspective. For many people, that has been turned just purely into a cult of personality. They never really learn about what it is that they're believing in or admiring or worshipping. Yeah? They don't learn about it. They don't process. They don't better themselves by taking in that information and cogitating it and learning it and taking the knowledge that's contained within to better themselves. They don't. They just automatically, without thinking, it's like put the little figurine on the shelf and worship it. Why? Because I was told to by somebody else. That's how I was brought up. My parents taught me to do this thing. I don't know why we do it. We just do it. Yeah? Whenever somebody mentions his name, we'll go, oh, blessed, oh, wonderful, oh, holy, divine, oh, I feel joyous. I feel that ejaculatory joy sensation. Oh, that's the cult of personality effect. So argue all you like about your religious points of view of, well, I think he was real and he was the child of God, and you're just displaying the defensive reactionary response of somebody who's just had their icon clasted, their iconoclastic effect of your cult of personality bubble has just been popped. Now the system takes that same principle of give people an icon to follow, give them a personality profile to go with that icon. So, in the case of Jesus Christ, that personality profile would be something like born of a simple family, honest, hard-working tradesman, realized that the empire system was abusing his own people, spoke out against the ills within his own society and religion, and sacrificed himself to prove his point, and then came back from the dead because he was divine and brought people love and healed the sick. And think, well, they'd include that all in a little like profile description to explain why people should love him and worship him and blah blah blah. And they do exactly the same kind of thing now with celebrities. And celebrity does not just mean a music star or a pop star, a movie star. No, celebrity is anyone that the system, the media propaganda puts on a pedestal and pushes onto the public consciousness in a constant fashion such that you're supposed to. It becomes obvious that they want you to worship this person, to treat them as if they're some kind of demigod. Jesus Christ wasn't meant to be a demigod, but for many people, that's what he's been turned into. He's been iconified such that now they're not looking, like I said, they're not looking and learning about the process and the principles involved in that whole storyline. They're just seeing an icon and worshipping the icon. They're seeing a symbol and worshipping the symbol. Cult of a personality does not necessarily have to be applied to a living being. It can also be applied to a symbol or a group. I think the Illuminati. The Illuminati has become yet another cult of personality, using the same principle of turn it into an icon, give it this nice sort of little catch-all profile of catchphrases and knowledge and meaning that it's supposed to carry, like a vehicle, because that's what it's being used as, a vehicle to carry propaganda. And then push that until people get it so stuck in their heads, because mind control is done with repetition. Repetition is a major element of mind control. I remember Dave's always saying it, and it works perfectly, because the more you've heard that phrase, the more you'll remember it. But that's what they do with these icons and this system of icons. They appropriate, simplify, corrupt, and commodify an idea or a personage, a being or a concept or a religious revelation, and then they push that new commodified simplistic version onto the audience, onto the public, and say, this is, if you got that kind of question, this is your answer. You only ever look at this box, stay within this box, kneel down before this box and worship it. Cult of personality. And they use these to create their theatre plays, like the situation currently ongoing with Trump. Trump is a cult of personality. He's not a politician. He's not a president. He's a theatre puppet, a personality that they built a cult around, and they're using that demographic to create real-world physical effects by influencing them through those cult connections to what they want to occur in the real world. And it's not to say he's the bad guy and the other's the good guy. No, they're doing the same thing. Punch and Judy needs to have Punch and Judy. There's got to be the two sides, the dualistic Hegelian process. So cult of personality. That as well, then I think links into the media. Who do you blame? Oh, blame the media. We went out in the streets and rioted because the media showed us pictures of dead babies on the beach, and we were angry and we needed to burn things down. Influenced by others. Media is just mass influence on mass. Like having a loudspeaker in the centre of town that pumps out the call to prayer. Influence on mass. The call to prayer doesn't necessarily mean something to do with Islam. They do the same thing whenever they're broadcasting a football match. Come to the stadium, come to the temple of football and celebrate the football. Hey! It's the same thing, just with a different set of clothing on. So the media, blame the media. Is it the media that's really to blame, or are they just peddlers of influence? Vehicles of influence? The infrastructure mechanism that carries the propaganda, blah, blah, blah. Is it them really that are to blame? I think one of the counterpoints to that would be all those people who work in media. How much culpability do they hold? What about the editors, especially the editors in chief? They have direct connections into the governmental control system, because they have to have the word of government in their ear to make sure that they're not publishing something that could bring down the government, because that's not allowed, is it? They better not print anything that would cause people to come out into the streets and all start hugging each other. Oh, no, we can't have that. That'd be too much like a loving. Oh, no, they'll get hippified, and then where would we be? They wouldn't need us anymore. So you're not allowed to print stuff like that. So they do hold a certain element of culpability, but then you can trace that tree back. Where did they get that influence from? Who influenced them? At what point did they stop deciding for themselves and abdicate to the influence of somebody else? Was it their parents that were at fault for not teaching them to stand in their own principles and say, no, mate, I ain't publishing that? Or the opposite of, we just got this information, we need to publish, the public needs to know. At what point did they stop doing that or never do it at all? So are they to blame? And that, I think, then, in the macro expansion of this question of who's to blame, I feel brings us to the system itself. Because the media is just a branch of the corporatist infrastructure itself. The BBC is the Gary's put it in the side. So yeah, government equals father, BBC equals mother. Yeah, that's the way it's presented to us here in the UK. The BBC is presented as if it's like this auntie. Yeah, that's how it's often referred to, auntie BBC, because it's meant to be this nurturing, cloistering, supposedly caring, but really it's keeping you trapped. It's not letting you go. It wants you to remain as a baby, as a child that it can cuddle and look after and care for, because that then justifies its very existence. It's an emanation of the parasitic mindset of the usurpers, controllers. And at the same time, in this internet environment, this so-called truth movement appropriation that has occurred over the nearly 2 decades since 9/11. I've talked about this kind of stuff many, many times at length. I know, if you haven't heard me talking about it before, but just to kind of encapsulate what I'm saying is a lot about what goes on in this supposed alternative media environment, the internet media environment, has been enabled and manipulated since the start. Since the beginnings of the internet, certainly since we've been allowed to make use of the internet, the public making use of the internet, since the World Wide Web, seeds were sown, infrastructures were enabled and set up. And then when we get to the point of 9/11 happening, the events of 9/11, then even more so, things were put into motion in this environment that would deliberately and actively appropriate and manipulate and steer and corrupt and misdirect a lot of the stuff that goes on in this environment, a lot of the information and a lot of the people that come through this environment looking for information, looking for answers, looking to try and alleviate their problems or just their sense of angst. There was a lot that was set up and enabled, and we've seen it roll out over the last few years. So this, you could call it the military-industrial complex, or the people have labelled it the truther-industrial complex. But it's all just sub-branches. They're all just parts of that corporatist system, that corporatist infrastructure. And part of the reason why I put cultability as a subtitle is because of some of those connections. At the moment, recently, there has been a further push. More effort has been put into pushing the point in this internet environment that there are cults of personality and cults of information in this environment. And if you ask certain questions or if you've got certain points of view, you get pushed into these cults. Oh, you're just in a cult, mate. You talk about 9/11 truth, that's just a fucking cult, mate. That bullshit, that deliberate misdirection has been enabled and pushed into this environment by the fucking system itself. Yes, there are cults in reality. Yes, you can go and research online about various cults, like the Moonies or the Jonestown cult is probably the ultimate classic that gets told again and again and again. The Jonestown cult was a CIA project. It wasn't a natural emanation. It was a CIA project in mind control. It was part of the MK Ultra and all that kind of shit that they were doing at the time. So it's not a good example when you say, oh, there's cults out there, you're just in a cult, mate. Oh, like Jonestown. It's like you don't know what the fuck you're saying. Yeah, just like Jonestown, it's a part of the system. So you've been caught in the cult of the system yet again. It's just that it's presenting itself as some kind of separate entity. It's Jonestown. So it's not Jonestown, it's CIA carrying out mind manipulation experiments on people. Then the system is very good at this shit. It's had a lot of time to practice and perfect these ideas. So you want to break up the people from getting together and meeting up with each other and working on things for themselves and doing their own thing. Just push this accusation this rumour mongering, this rumour mill system of, oh, if you've got questions like that, you've got ideas like that, you're part of a cult, which means you're automatically ostracised, labelled, excluded, targeted, oppressed, maybe even eradicated in one way or another. So the system's quite happy for people to keep propagating that bullshit. You can quite easily do some research online, learn what a cult is, the definition of a cult. You can find plenty of examples of cults, like the Moonies, Scientology, statism, loads of, there's examples out there that you can learn about so you can comprehend the concept of what it means to be in a cult or what a cult is and what they do and blah, blah, blah. And then you can look at what's going on here in this environment and question yourself and go, am I in a cult? Well, am I allowed to leave? Yes, I am. I can click the button whenever I like and I can leave. I could turn the computer off and go outside if I wanted to. So that's not a cult then, is it? Can I question the leader? Yes, I can, because this is an open environment where if you've got questions, you can post your own content online. So, yeah, you're questioning the leader. So is it a cult then? No. Is anybody demanding that I give up all my worldly possessions to these people that organise or run this operation? No, nobody's asking me for that. There's loads of people out here that ask for money, yeah, and there's loads of con men that try to sell you snake oil shit, yeah. But that's just the same as you find in a market square. So again, that's not a cult. That's just people trying to exploit each other. Is there a requirement that I have to go through some kind of hazing or initiation ceremony to become part of this little group to be allowed in and shit? No. So therefore it's not a cult, is it? All these elements are quite easy to learn about and quite easy to ask yourself when you come into this environment. Oh, I'm told that if I listen to Alex Jones, that means I'm part of the Alex Jones cult. Hang on a minute. There's a big red X button there that I can click off whenever I want to. So therefore, he's not forcing me to listen to what he's saying. The door isn't locked. I can leave whenever I want. So it's not a cult. Do I just believe everything he says and buy all his products and bow down at his knees? And that would be a cult of personality. If I'm unable to question him, his information, his motives, his intentions, then yeah, cult of personality maybe, but it's not a cult. So where does that cultability come into the question? People have been given what is, I think, in a true sense, it is worth people being aware of cults and how they operate and how it can be extremely detrimental to your well-being, maybe potentially even your life, to get caught up in or to join in with cults. Some of them certainly. It's definitely worth people knowing about that. But then using that kind of general knowledge as a fear-based tactic to chase people in certain directions, that's just as exploitative as a system using pictures of dead babies on beaches. You're peddling the same bullshit. Yes, there are cults in the world. Is this environment of people talking about these questions and information and looking to better their own lives and better the world around at large if they can, is that a cult? No. And it's idiotic to say so. All you're doing is justifying the system's claim to authority over everybody else. You're reinforcing their justifications. So is the system to blame? Is it the system that created that methodology or initiated the use of that kind of methodology? Yeah. But at what point is the system a thing that can actually be held to account? We've got to get past one of the other things I put into mention is proxy forces. But proxy forces really, it's kind of like the same as saying the enforcers, or it's that bureaucratic demographic, the order followers, those people that just see the structure of authority as being sacrosanct in some manner, such that if somebody who's carrying the right costume and symbols to represent a position in the authority that is higher than them, then they automatically just follow the orders whenever they're given. You know, I can equate from my own experience when I sort of hung around with a few different motorcycle gangs when I was living in Birmingham back in the 90s, or late 80s, early 90s. You know, there was 3 main gangs really in the Midlands where I was. But I ain't going to get into details. Basically, the point was, I liked riding motorbikes. I liked going to the pub and having a drink. So I ended up sort of rubbing shoulders with a lot of people like that. I got the impression that if I'd wanted to, I could have prospected for 1 or 2 of them. You know, potentially I could have asked to join. You go through this process where you're a prospect and you have to prove yourself through doing various things and blah, blah, blah. Then you get brought into the brotherhood as a full member and all that kind of shit. It's like so many other groups and societies. Yeah. But my point being, the reason I'm referencing this is, even at the time I looked at the situation and I thought, well, yeah, I like the idea of being in that kind of group because we're all interested in the same kind of stuff. We enjoy the same kind of things, as in riding our motorbikes and listening to live music and having a drink and all that kind of good stuff. But to have access to that group camaraderie, you require of me as a prospect that I just automatically obey any order given to me. So if you tell me I have to ride from Land's End to John O'Groats and I'm not allowed to stop to have a piss or a shit, in other words, you have to piss and shit yourself while you're riding, I'm going to tell you to F off, mate. It's like, no, that's just nasty, mate, for the sake of pulling over and having a bio break, as they say. Or if a situation occurs in a pub where your little gang decides that somebody has affronted you and you're going to beat them up, the first people you're going to tell to go and start the fight are the prospects. So, like my example earlier, being given the order to pull the trigger, you're asking me to just start beating on somebody just because you have decided for some reason that you don't like the guy's face. No, I ain't doing that shit, man. You can keep your benefits of being in a club because you require that kind of shit from me. No, I wouldn't do it. So I never got involved in any of the gangs and motorcycle clubs because of that kind of element. Yeah, that requirement of being an order follower of the hierarchical system. It's part of the reason why I left the armed forces as well. At that time, I learned that about myself, that I did not work well with authority figures giving me orders that I questioned. Polish that step. Why? You must use boot polish and polish that step until it's shining. But everybody's going to walk on it as soon as I've finished, which means it's pointless. I don't care. Do it. Yeah. That's the kind of shit you get in the forces. But anyway. Yeah, the system and their proxy forces of order followers. Are the order followers culpable? Or are they suffering from an inability to stand up for themselves and they're following the influence of others? In other words, the others that are giving them orders. Where's the culpability in that situation? At this point, I thought it was worth adding in as well, because this is certainly very relevant, and some of the stuff I mentioned right at the beginning about the shenanigans in this internet environment. The computer says no. Who's to blame? Oh, the computer says no. You know, that element of the AI as well that's been pushed a lot in recent years, feeding people's fear of that godlike power of some non-human entity to fuck with their lives. You know? That has been stoked by a lot of the propaganda that's been pushed out there. The technology itself is where the culpability lies. but the technology only operates while it's turned on, and it's a human being that flicks that on-off switch. So like what I was saying about a cult earlier with this environment, you've got the ability to turn your computer off, go outside and do something else. So is the culpability with the computer? Although the computer says no, that at that point the computer is just being used as a tool by the bureaucracy of the infrastructure of governance itself. So where's the culpability? Is it the computer, or is it the system of governance that has utilised that computer to pump out certain messages? And that, I think, nicely brings us to secret occult societies, or secret and occult, or just occult, or just secret. Secret and occult are somewhat interchangeable. You can use both or either or. Those groups that have large amounts of influence for one reason or another, those groups that are very, very embedded into the infrastructure, the foundations of most of our society, maybe not truly global, but certainly a very large percentage of the entire society. Those influence groups, those power players that can affect worldly affairs on the macro, the global scale, and the micro scale, such that it affects all of us individually. Are they to blame? Is that where the blame ultimately lies? They're the ones that hold all the culpability. I think that's getting closer to really the truth of a lot of what goes on in this world when people ask those questions of like, well, my life's shit. Why is my life shit? Who's to blame? Where is the culpability? And this brings me to the main point, links me back to last week's show of talking about God and the afterlife and that kind of stuff. Reincarnation. Try and reincarnate that frog. He wants to live again. Talking about using that amorphous, externalized excuse of, it wasn't me that's at fault, mate. It was because God made it happen. I didn't kill him. I was influenced by the devil. The devil did it. The devil made me do it. That kind of use of the ultimate external excuse factor. Potentially, possibly. Because it gets into the totally open question of whether you accept that there is a something else or not. If you're a total atheist, if you believe that there is nothing like that whatsoever, there's no kind of otherworldly sentience or thing, being, then you'd say absolutely no. You can't use that excuse of like, the devil made me do it. I'm not really evil. It's just the devil made me do it. You can't use that excuse because there is no devil. And even if you are a believer of one form or another, you have a faith of one form or another, whether it be whatever particular religion, or whether it be a certain philosophical viewpoint like agnostic or theist or deist or pantheist or whatever, whatever your viewpoint, if you have some kind of faith, even then it's still an excuse. It's not a reality that you can prove. You're trying to say that God took you over like you were a marionette, a little puppet, and it wasn't you doing the things, it was the spirit of God animating your body to do this, that, or the other. Hey, you can't prove that, so it's just another excuse. It might work if you're talking to somebody else who has the same faith as you, but then isn't that just in a similar way like a cult of personality? I only did this because Bob Monkhouse took me over and was making me dance like an idiot. I don't dance like an idiot normally. I dance really good, but Bob Monkhouse was making me do the dance, so it wasn't me, it was Bob Monkhouse. Can you prove that? How would you prove that? It's certainly something that maybe, leave the part of the open question in that would be, well, maybe in the future we'll have technology or abilities that means you could sort of show that kind of otherworldly influence or prove it. Or yeah, people have been asking that for a long time. And so far, nobody's come up with with a proof that is convincing enough that it can influence people en masse. If there was, then the majority of the world would all be of that one particular faith. But that's not the reality of the world. There's three major monopolistic faiths, but there's also a hell of a lot of others. People have a diversity of belief systems. So that proves that nobody has yet found a proof strong enough to back up their argument that their particular faith is the one that is right and true and blah, blah, blah. That in and of itself can be somewhat of an open and loose statement, But that, I think, hopefully brings me back to, because one other thing I put in my notes, just you could just as easily say Lizard Kings and the Flying Spaghetti Monster. And this is part of some of the stuff that gets used in this environment to supposedly debunk or disprove people that have questions about some of the shit going on in the world. So you think it might be the influence of some occultic society. Well, what are their influences? They're influenced by Lizard Kings. They worship some image, some symbolism, not a physical living entity or an entity from the past or whatever. No, it's just a symbol, mate, but they worship it and they then use that to influence the rest of the world, and that's what makes it. So you might as well just say Lizard Kings and Flying Spaghetti Monster. It's the same thing, stuff that you can't prove in any way strong enough such that it would or convince large numbers of the population. It's too much of an open question, speculation, possibility, theory, hypothesis, not yet proven. But it brings me back to what I said right at the beginning of this laundry list of who's to blame: yourself. As I mentioned right at the start when I said yourself, the system has been actively enabling and encouraging a perception of that principle of you having responsibility for the majority of what happens in your life. And they pushed it to the point that they can use it as a reflection whenever you have questions of who's to blame. Who's to blame for why I haven't got enough to eat? Could it be the infrastructure of the governmental system that is using methods such as that, restriction of available dietary products, to influence me, like financial manipulation? Or is it my own fault? The system would say it's your fault, because from the system's point of view, that is a benefit for it. If you think it's all your own responsibility, you'll chase your own tail, running around in your little world, constantly being subjected to this domination of them fucking up your diet because you're too busy blaming yourself. Because it's far easier to just go, oh, yes, I am stupid. Yeah, it was my own. I'm such a dumb fuck. Oh, I made all these mistakes. It's my own fault that all this is shit. They're quite happy for people to do that, because then they can just pretend that they're not to blame in any way whatsoever, and they can carry on doing the same things to people, because that group confirmation effect will mean those people will all rub shoulders with each other and go, oh, you guys shit diet. Oh yeah, it's our own fault, and I was so stupid, I ate all the fatty stuff, I'm such a dumb fuck. Yeah. Whereas the reality of it is the availability of, I'm picking just food here, just to use that as one example, but I hope you get the idea that there's so many other things that you can look at that have the same root causes. They have the same connections. Yeah, is it more likely the reality of the availability of diet or the things for people to eat, the food industry, the food infrastructure in most modern societies has been so heavily influenced and manipulated and molded into a certain shape that it means wherever you live, I refer to the UK just as my own experiential reference primarily. I know this is true for most of Europe as well, and certainly the Americas, etc. You know, what is available to me within my environment is such that I inevitably will end up with a poor diet. And the propaganda furthers that. The corporatist propaganda is quite happy for you to eat shit and die, eat shit and become ill, so that big pharma, or as Paul, the guy on Raconteur News earlier said, a big harmer, can step in and go, oh, you're feeling a bit ill, here, have a pill, have another pill to counteract the effects of that pill, have another pill, have another pill, have another pill, have another. And you become a wealth generating factory for other people's benefit, not for your own, because you'll be too busy chasing your own tail going, oh, it's my own fault because I ate that hamburger. I'm such a dickhead. But what was available to you that was affordable to you at the time was shit like that. Is that a coincidence? I don't think so. That's my point of view on it anyway. It's not a coincidence that the situation of our societies has ended up in this way. This has been deliberate for decades, gradually, step by step, leading towards certain conclusions. Agenda 21, etc. So the culpability of you yourself within that, who's to blame? Blame the who's, blame the who. Who are you blaming? I think it needed reiterating that there is, just like many other principles of duality within this experience that we call reality, there is a duality of blame most of the time, not always, most of the time, very often, to one degree or another, to a certain degree. It might be 10% your own fault, 90% somebody else's fault. Or it might be the other way around, 90% your fault, 10% somebody else's fault. But most of the time, it is not an either or thing. It's not all your fault. I agree with a lot of the concept and principles of you create your own reality for many different reasons and based on many different bits of evidence and argument. I agree with the majority of it. But I also agree with the existential perception that I am not the only sentient being here. You're here as well. So that means there is a possibility, there is an opportunity for you to have influence in one way or another over things that they end up having a result that of an effect on my life. So something you say could cause something to happen in my life, or something you do, or something you take away, or something you destroy before I get to use it. There is that now there is that possibility, because I'm not the only one here. And we're on a planet with loads of other people. So that interactive shared space means that it is more than likely a combination of both, and it's a little bit your fault and a little bit somebody else's fault, or something else's fault. Yeah. But that then connects you back to that. Blame God, blame nature. Force majeure, as the insurance companies call it, something that happens outside of human influence, like natural catastrophes. And don't want to start talking in like influencing weather and creating earthquakes, but hopefully you get the point. So there is a truth to an element, to a certain degree, of you yourself have a power and an influence within your own life. Of course you do. You are your own authority. So some of what is wrong in your life could be your own fault, but that doesn't necessarily mean it absolutely is. And that isn't taking into account all the other things going on in reality around you, because you're not here on your own. You're not in a little bubble of existence. So don't believe this bullshit hype. Either the unicorns and fairies, kind of vacuous concept of, oh, well, everybody creates their own thing. Your own reality is created out of your thoughts. You just think rainbows and everything will be rainbows. Doesn't really work that way. And that is encouraged by the system because it encapsulates people into their own little narcissistic bubbles. And at the same time, if they've tripped you into the kind of depressive entropic thinking where you think everything is going to turn to shit, everything's becoming shit, everything's shit, my life's shit, the world's shit, everything's shit, oh shit, then you're more likely to agree with the same principle, but on that darker point of view where it's like, oh yeah, of course it's my own fault because I'm such an idiot. I did this all to myself. I stabbed myself. Look, I'm stabbing myself. That's not really the truth either. When somebody is suicidal, because I saw this recently to a certain degree, just sort of emanating out from certain things, but if you've ever encountered somebody who is genuinely suicidal, they are not aggressive with that suicidal ideation, as they call it. Ideation just means thinking about ideas of, it's one of those obsessive thoughts that's stuck in your head. You keep going back to it and touching it like a sore tooth. Suicidal ideation. If somebody is in that mode of thinking or that mindset at the time, they're not aggressive. Somebody is aggressively suicidal, telling you about it, that means they're bullshitting, most likely. Because that is the methodology of a sociopath who is threatening to hurt themselves to force you to do something that they want. Oh, the world's so shit, I think I might kill myself. You need to care about me. You have to listen to my woes. You have to listen to my bullshit. You have to give me all your energy. Often people get referred to as energy vampires, and you will encounter that kind of aggressive threat to suicide from energy vampires because they live in the drama energy. Their own selves are so shriveled and lost within themselves that the only way they can feel alive is by being on that tumultuous energy wave of doing something like threatening to kill yourself. When people are truly suicidal, they hardly ever mention it. Most of the time, you have to draw it out of them with careful questioning, so that you don't push them in a bad way. You ask anybody who's done counselling, they'll tell you that. You can't just confront directly somebody who is suicidal because you'll potentially just kick them straight over the edge. So if somebody's getting in your face with that kind of, you need to care for me because I'm suicidal, that more than likely means they're bullshitting, and this is just an emotional manipulation. They have other shit going on in their heads, which means they externalize in that kind of fashion. They want attention for some reason. That could connect back to trolls and bullies and whatever. But anyway, it was just some things I saw recently that made me thought, I want to mention that in reference to this, because when the system constantly pushes this idea that global warming's your fault, poverty's your fault, all the problems in the world are your fault, it starts to add up eventually. I feel it certainly did for me many years ago. It starts to add up like, hang on a minute, no, it fucking ain't, mate. I'm not the one pulling that trigger. I'm not the one force feeding people GMO shit. I'm not the one sticking vaccines in children. So who is to blame here? Who is culpable? Blame the who's. Who are they? At some point, there will be a somebody. There will be a name. There will be the person that pressed the button or signed the order or whatever, or gave the order. And I wanted to do this particular subject this week because I thought, after what I was saying last week, so I know the usual methodology and arguments of the debunkers. I've heard them many, many times. So often it will be, thrown back at you like, oh, you believe in God. That means you think, it's okay to do this, that, and the other just because God said so. And it's like, no, but you're still not getting it really. Because as I tried to explain last week, these concepts of good and evil, that's all down to us. We create them and we then enforce them upon each other. We're the ones doing the stabbing. I ain't seen a big hand of God come down out the sky and start stabbing people. It's human beings that do this shit to each other. And we can question where their influences come from, but in the long run, they are the choice point. And from my personal point of view, the way I approach my faith in that sense is free will is an absolute. You have free will. You have the choice to pull that trigger or not. You could have the voice of God in one ear and the voice of the devil in the other, trying to influence you one way or the other, but it's still left to you in the middle. You're the one in the middle that makes the action, that says the words, etc., etc. Anyway, hopefully that all made sense. And I went on for longer than I meant to. Sorry, guys. I tried to stick within about an hour because I know otherwise you must get fed up sat there.
No, we're still here. We're still here. Don't worry.
Yeah. Jump all over me if you want.
No, it's good. I was just making a few notes myself. Made some really interesting points there, Cookie. Good stuff. I mean, the cult stuff and order followers. I just made a few, not making a couple of notes myself, thinking, it's interesting how you've broken it down as well into the family, the migration, media, the system, yourself. There's lots of things to blame, isn't there? And it's an interesting thing how we all just gravitate towards blaming. It's the blame game society. I've called it for years. It's blame him, or you've got to blame them, or blame that. But there's no real. Where's the solutions? It's like we seem to put the blame, or we have heads up and we think, yeah, that's going to happen. It happens, but no one seems to want to change the way in which the game's being played at the moment. So the blame game carries on. And with secret societies, as you mentioned, embedded the way they are and everything else, and indoctrination, the way your mind's being shaped, the way people bow down, because of the order followers sort of thing. They're bowing down to their masters, and it goes down the chain. You bow down to your master, and as they say, when any bad news comes, shit rolls downhill. In the sense of a company or whatever you work for. So it all rolls down. Eventually, everyone's affected by it. So, everybody's sort of bowing down because what do they do it for in that sort of situation? Well, pay, money, the energy,
survival.
Money, the energy, survival, everything like that. So we're sort of, and then we educated, aren't we? So the education system from birth, from a young toddlers now are getting thrown into, sort of, schools at 2 and 3 years old now and things like that. There's no sort of time with the parents. There's no kind of, both parents are working. So that sort of creates the, environment for them to do all this as well, to get your kids at a young age and to, really sort of, basically indoctrinate them. And that's why we get the system the way it is and the order followers the way they are. Until that sort of changes. I mean, we could change it in a couple of generations. That guy I always talk about in the past. Was his name Bezmenov? I can't remember his first name. But Yuri, that's the guy. The one who said about, how to subvert a nation within 2 years. How do you manipulate? How do you do this? How do you do that? And, they know how to do this within a few generations. You can change it to what we've got now, if you like, which is a kind of very dark, sort of, negative, like I say, order following, bowing down, idiots, all the rest of it, system. You could change that around within a generation or two by just the difference how you teach children, how you teach them, what you teach in universities, how you are using the media. As you say, they use all of these things against us, it seems.
It's repeated every generation. It's like, I was just thinking from the point of view of, like I mentioned about, like, you know, you don't see the hand of God coming out the sky to stab people. It's a person doing the stabbing, yeah? So when it comes to the kind of questions about like religious beliefs, that kind of indoctrination within a society, within a culture to a particular religious point of view. And the classic example is the Hebrew people, the Jewish people who've been put into this situation where they get indoctrinated every generation, this reinforcement of, oh, you're the chosen ones, everybody else is out to get you, you better stab them before they stab you. Yeah, so when people say, oh, it's the fault of the Jews, it's the fault of, just like, okay, we can talk about the reality of Jewish people being in positions where there's concentrations of power for one reason or another, and they're influencing, like you say, that shit rolling downhill, yeah? But when it comes down to it, they're a human being doing what they're doing. They can claim that they're doing it because this thing that they call God told them to. Yeah, but they're still the one making the decision and carrying out the actions. So this kind of claim of like, oh, it's the fault of their particular God because they worship the wrong God, is, go away with your stupid arguments. Yeah, it's not. Because if it was, we'd see the hand of Jehovah coming out of the sky stabbing people, but we don't. We see people stabbing people.
Yeah, and that's again. Go on, Gary. You say something.
I was going to say, you know, if people are so keen on blame, then give them a good definition of something they are to blame for, and that's not taking responsibility for themselves. And I mean that ties into other things, like we see, you know, the courts being lenient. Oh, we've got to forgive this guy. There might be reasons he did this. There might be reasons he was abusing children. They let them go 3 or 4 years later, and it's reinforcing that idea that you're not really responsible for what you do. Yeah. So that the responsibility that gets reinforced by the criminal justice system. You'll still go to jail, but a lot of people are going to look at the you know, the sentences that are handed out and say, Christ, you know, and then the judge says, well, he wasn't responsible for what he was doing, because, you know, people like us, we can't be responsible for anything. So they're reinforcing
animals.
Yeah,
it reinforces that idea that you're just a dumb animal, that you're not really in control of yourself or your own life. I was thinking as well with that, it's like the school indoctrination, educational indoctrination, like Peter mentioned, yeah. But alongside of that, we have the social cultural indoctrination that is like an education, but it's not. It's something that doesn't take place in a school. Yeah, it's just the general environment of your society teaches you, indoctrinates you with what that society considers the norms. So if in your society people wear, you know, complete coveralls like hijabs or whatever, you know, you grow up with the same kind of ideas and attitudes. You know, it's just reinforcing again, kind of externalization of responsibility. Why do you wear that particular thing? Oh, because everybody else around me wears it. You know, that's what I was educated into within my society.
yeah. On the group affirmation thing, I mean, you remember maybe a lot of people will remember that, you know, when your dad was angry with you, you used to go to your mum. And so, you know, the group affirmation was coming from mother and father. At school, it may have been different teachers. You know, you thought, oh, I'm not going to listen to this teacher because I don't like him. But, you know, I like my history teacher, so I'll learn my morals from him because he's a nice teacher, he's a good one. And so it's, you know, these authority figures. And then the celebrities, of course, you know, the Kardashian, a Kardashian might get shot down. She might have a scandal. Who sets the scene? Who tells us what to think about it? All the other celebrities. So the group affirmation, it's a strange thing because it's a dangerous thing to teach people group affirmation unless you've given them the group leaders to listen to. Yeah, because if people start looking for group affirmation, they might actually start talking to each other, and they don't want you to do that. So it's weird that people that have been isolated have been taught this reflex to group affirmation, because there is no group. There is no group. It's all coming from the top.
Could it be, though, in a similar fashion to biological systems, where in effect what you're describing is like I can't think of the proper wording for it. Like, it's like the cell division. You know, one cell differentiating itself from the other matter around it. So when you've got those smaller groupings, they tend to be more tightly knit together and they rely on each other more, like a tribal group. Yeah.
I'll tell you just what occurred to me, what Uspensky used to say about the eyes. That each of us is multiple different people for different situations.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe that's where the natural feeling to a group affirmation comes from, you know? Oh, I don't agree with Cookie. Oh, I don't agree with him either. Neither do I. You know, it's the different people that are inside each of us that creates that feeling that there is a group there affirming what we say. Because you see trolls and they only need one voice to egg them on. But some of them don't even need that. You know, they're egging themselves on from different voices within.
Yeah, the little voice in their head is egging them on. Yeah.
The little voices, you know, the little split personalities inside themselves.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Because otherwise, group affirmation is, you know, you've got to have the group there. And again, that's not taking responsibility for what you're thinking. You're, oh, here's a group, and there are people, and they'll tell me what to think, and I don't have to think anymore. And that's what people are to blame for, yeah? Not, you know, not growing a set, basically, and trusting their own feeling of what's right.
Yeah, but that's where the fear comes in, doesn't it? The fear of sort of you know, when you're in a group, you probably feel safer, feels more comfortable. But then there's stuff going on within the groups or whatever that you don't agree with, but because you feel comfortable, you stay there. And it's about, you know, if you can balance emotions within yourself better, you know, so it's that how they sort of pull your emotions all over the place, especially, you know, general society and everything, you know, with the news, with what's going on in life, you know, the bills, whatever, you know, it's like your emotional state seems to be getting pulled, you know, a lot. And the more you sort of in a city sort of environment, it's probably even more, you know, it's constant, you know, there's lots of what you call stimulus around you constantly, you know, sort of fluctuating everything that's going on, your mind's racing, that sort of thing. You're busy, you're planning, you're doing this, you're doing that, you know, and it's difficult. And then when something happens to you, you have an emotional sort of mess or breakdown because you haven't had time to even stop and think about anything that you're doing in yourself. It's just this constant flow of energy, constant forward, and then bang, something occurs maybe or something, and people get, you know, again, it's how you deal with things or just general petty things now, you know, the way in which people can now form little groups, I suppose, on Facebook and things and slag people off and do secret slaggings off, you know, and have a good laugh about people and slag them off, you know. It's like just take the piss, and you know, people do that all the time. That's part of, you know, but it's like how far, you know, does it sort of go in a sense, how we sort of, if you like, looking at each other generally, if you like, say a troll, if you met them face to face, would probably be okay in a sense. He was trolling you online and saying stuff, but to your face and in the different energy field, it's completely different, you know. So this is where the internet becomes a bit of an unreality in that sense, but people take it all so seriously because, you know, there's a lot of people on here just taking the piss and having a laugh. Some of them are trolls, some of them are agents, but there's a lot of people doing that sort of stuff, and you just have to accept that's the environment we're in. If you want to partake in it in a kind of sort of serious or half serious way and still have a laugh about it as well, but, you know, doing it in a good way. But you're going to get people coming in, like we've said in the past, will try and do what they do. But again, it's just, we just keep moving forward and just doesn't, you know, just ignore that crap and just keep doing what you do.
Part of the white noise. It's like white noise in the background.
Yeah.
I'll tell you what I picked up on what you just said, Peter. When you said people going along with things they don't agree with, and I have noticed a hell of a lot of that in American politics at the moment. The Trump Democrats thing.
Just agreeing, just thinking, yeah, it's okay. It's like if someone says to you, I remember back in the day when you'd be watching TV or something years ago, or there's some crap on, and there was someone was recommending something, saying, you got to watch this, you got to watch this, and then everybody's watching it and everybody's talking about it. Like you get the Twitter feed now, the Twitter trending, what's popular. And you'd say to yourself, okay, I'll go and look at it because, you know, you got me there. I'll go and have a look at this, see what it's about. And it would be, say, some TV show or whatever it was. And I think it was complete shite. But then everybody around me, I think, you know it's shite, but you're just pretending you like it. You're so sad, man. It's like you could see that with people. You think, for fuck's sake, just say it's shit.
Conformity.
Yeah, it's shite. You know, it's like, yeah,
But the people who love a particular TV show, you know,
yeah.
do you like it? It's like, you sit there and you feel so under threat.
Yeah.
You know, you got the whole group around you all saying how much they love it. They love it. They love it. You're like, I hate to tell you guys, but I think it's shit.
It's fucking crap. It's yeah. But again, being honest, or like I say, when you like the conformity thing, you know, and then exploiting people as well within groups, as you mentioned, exploitation and things of, you know, that occur, and then getting you to dress or act or say a certain thing or use a certain symbol. That's what they've been doing more recently, say in the, you know, with all this Illuminati shit that's been floating around for the past 10 odd years or whatever, and it's, you know, through the music and everything else, you know, getting people to adopt certain things and think that's okay and don't really look into it. It's all just fashion, don't you know? It's all just this, but being manipulated. We were, I suppose, in the 80s and the 90s, I suppose, you know. But again, I saw it for what that was. I mean, there's an awful lot of music, and I'm not just a grumpy old git, you know. I always hated pop music, or most of it. You know, it wasn't just, I was a kid too, and I didn't like most of it. Some of it was all right, but you know, it was like, yeah, I had a mind. I could think what I liked and what I didn't like. And if it, you know, it's that kind of thing. You wouldn't just go with the flow of what was, everybody was going, yeah, they're really good. You know, you could sort of, I suppose, from an early age, think for yourself. I'm sure there's lots of kids out there who do still, you know. But it's that sort of being true to yourself as well. You do go along with certain things. You have to go along with certain things, especially in education. You know, you've got to go here. You've got to told, you know, getting you to understand. You have authority figures who will tell you what to do, and you will obey them. You know, and if you don't, well, you'll go to detention and you'll be punished, or that kind of thing. Or back in the day when I went to school, you got whipped with a cane, or you know, or chased around the classroom by the teacher who was, I don't know, a slipper or something. You know, in the infant school. You know, so kids are under, you know, getting threatened by the teachers. You know, they are the authority figures. You know, at an early age. That doesn't seem to work these days with the current education model. That's what I was going to say before. You know, I mentioned education as being what to blame, but again, yeah, that model is dead. Really, the current system, the current way they do things, doesn't work. I don't think it does.
I agree with you, yeah, but I think that's not because it doesn't work for their benefit, and not the education system itself, just the way they've been doing it. Yeah, the way we were taught, that's old paradigm. Now they've got the internet. They need to change the paradigm of how the education works. And I think as well, to add into that, a lot of the stuff to do with the population's general health also is part of the reason why they're changing that paradigm. Because now, I don't like saying it because it sounds somewhat pessimistic and negative, but I think it's somewhat of a reality, yeah? That now they've got a generation that are more easily manipulated psychologically and are very confused deliberately, almost to the point of being schizophrenic, or in some way their mentality, their spirituality is fractured, so that is more suited then to an education system that is also more fractured and confused. Yeah. So it's like teaching schizophrenia to a schizophrenic. I know, like I said, it sounds horrible saying it, but that's a lot of what I see about the modern style and approach with the common purpose attitude in the here in the UK in the education system.
It's just corporate education, isn't it? For corporate job, for the system that we're talking about, was who's to blame, you know? So it's that feedback back into it via the education. So yeah,
it's still fulfilling the same remit as the Prussian school system, which is to a large degree what we got subjected to through the 80s. Yeah, it was still the dominant kind of curriculum style, the teaching by rote and whatever. Yeah, but the way they're doing it now is still achieving the same end goal of churning out a general population that is not truly educated. They're just given a certain level of a body of knowledge. So if you imagine the sort of tree of knowledge, they're only given a base level of knowledge, like the policeman with the black and white on their hat to represent the base level of consciousness.
Yeah.
So the general population is not given true education. They're given
No.
just enough knowledge and ability, mentally, capability, to be able to take in the propaganda of the system so that it reinforces their indoctrination process. So basically, again, I know it sounds horrible to say it, so that basically in a classic Orwellian style, they are too dumb to realize they're being oppressed. They're too dumb and lacking in cognitive ability to be able to figure out how they're being manipulated and exploited.
And I would imagine a lot of the media figures, the characters in TV shows and that, they actually, you know, they're acting that personification of being dumb, but it's trendy. It's trendy to be dumb and confused all the time and random. Yeah. Oh, he's so random.
Schizophrenic.
Yeah, and that's the fashionable way to be. The way, like in the 80s, do you remember? They had a big campaign, anti-drugs, and it was heroin, fucks you
Just
up.
say no.
Yeah, but the guy they used to use in the thing was like a bit like me, thin, really fucking looked out of his head. Yeah, but all the women were like, "Whoa, he's a bit of all right." You know, it had the exact opposite fucking effect on the young people. Yeah, they all wanted to be like these fucking. Because they didn't really look messed up, did they? The people in them posters. Some of them look pretty cool, yeah, like the sort of people I used to see when I used to go and listen to live music, yeah. Just
that's a very good argument, right? I feel anyway, just thinking about it, you correlate that with the general rise in the knowledge base about drug use and the way it become much more socially acceptable. And I'm not talking about what I consider to be, good drug use. I don't abuse my drugs. I know how to use them properly. Thank you very much. But there was that push of drug culture, and certainly then you get into the 90s, and you've got things like train spotting. It was propagandized. It was trendified as a subculture to encourage people to get into it.
Yeah. And on top of that, you had the highbrows and the higher middle class all talking about the new synthetic brain drugs, which weren't really drugs at all. Yeah, and that was on top of it all. Yeah, it's kind of legitimizing it.
Then you get movies like Limitless. Seen that one with the synthetic drugs, taking it, like you say, to the next level. Putting it out there, giving it to you. We know that through the 60s and that, where they propagated LSD and all that stuff. They gave it to you. They were, they were happy for people to take it and get on with it. Same with ecstasy. Same thing again. They introduced that. It was flooded in the 80s. That wasn't it? That became a popular one and still is now. And all these class A's, like the rise in cocaine use in the UK. In general, if you're out and about and you go to clubs and pubs and stuff, and you walk around, you see the young kids these days. I'm sure you'd notice what I used to notice going out back in the day, and that was 10 years ago, and think, wow, cocaine's come to these small little areas like this, and it's most, that's how it's been spread, and it's just,
cocaine is more popular than cannabis.
Yeah, well, it seems to be, doesn't it?
I know a lot of people wouldn't believe that because of the amount of propaganda about cannabis, but that's because of the health benefits of cannabis. They don't want us using it in a healthy way. They want us to just view it as being bad. But cocaine is, certainly in the UK, cocaine is more popular than cannabis.
I think the whole reason they brought in ecstasy was because LSD was actually doing as much good as it was doing harm.
Probably right. It all adds in as well towards that kind of Brave New World environment, because what they could be doing at the moment, I think certainly as well in the 60s, they were trying to deliberately create a kind of subculture based purely on drug use, or on altered states of consciousness achieved via drug use. But now it seems more that they just want consumption of drugs to be normalized completely. And that suits very much as like a seed to prepare the public for when they introduce the things like Soma and whatever. Pharmaceutical. It already exists. Really.
Well, I think it already does. I think
I've argued this before. It is already in effect, basically. The pharmaceutical system pumps out so much stuff that the general practitioners are quite happy to prescribe to people most of the time, that in effect we have large demographics of the population that are in a state of soma. Yeah, they can't exist without going to the doctor and getting their latest batch of pills, and they're popping pills every day or whatever it is that they take. Yeah? Soma. Who's to blame for that? Right, I'm gonna have another look through the chat, guys, and say hello to people because it's coming up 10:30, so I'll wind it up in a minute. While I'm saying hello to people in the chat, if you think of anything you want to mention, then we can do that.
Well, I made a note. This was a strange thing that got to me, that, and you know, your parents have an instinct about you sometimes. And I remember it really used to wind me up as a kid. Like, it put a little fucking splinter in my head that, you know, there was something I didn't understand. And that was when my parents used to tell me to stop showing off.
Yeah.
You ever had that? But you'd sit there as a kid thinking, but I wasn't showing off. Yeah, showing off is something I do with my mates. You know, you brag about your new bike. Yeah, I've got more gears on my bike than you. That's showing off. Whatever it was I was doing, it wasn't the same. And I realised looking back that those were the moments when the showing off, the ego had taken over so much that I didn't even know that I was in ego. But my parents would notice, and you're showing off. Yeah, and you know, it's taken a long time for me to understand the connection there, because there is a connection between ego when you're in charge of it. Yeah, showing off to your mates, and you know you're doing it.
Yeah.
And the time when ego has just taken over completely, so you're blind to the ego that's driving it, but your parents still noticed. Yeah, but yeah, to understand that it was the same kind of thing. Yeah, and didn't just make it up. Whatever it was they had in their mind, showing off, it was what I was doing, even though I couldn't understand it at the time. I didn't have a clue. Yeah, it used to really make me angry. In fact, that was probably the anger was probably me coming out of ego, out of a negative emotion of ego. Yeah, but it did used to make me angry because I couldn't understand what they were talking about. But,
so were your parents to blame for that then?
no, your parents did fuck you up, but they didn't mean to. Who was that? That was a famous poet, wasn't it? Again, almost certainly controlled. Yeah, your parents didn't. Yeah.
It's the same problem every generation, though. Who influenced your parents? Their parents. And who influenced their parents? Their parents. And who influenced their parents? Their parents. You see what I mean? You know, it's the same question every generation. Are your problems your own fault, or are they the fault of your parents and shit like that? It's not one or the other, you know, it's not that simplistic. But telling you to stop showing off, I can remember my dad saying shit like that to me. Usually when I was climbing on things, because I was a bit of a monkey when I was a little kid. I used to like climbing up on top of things and shit like that.
I blame Brexit.
Yeah. Yeah, every day I blame Brexit. I've got me anti-Brexit banana. Or I should say maybe it'd be pro-Brexit, because it's not straight, you know, it's not EU straight, organic and whatever. But yeah, fuck the Brexit. Sorry. Anyway, I'll say hello. Age of Crocodilia. Hello, mate. I thought it was quite good that I think the first time you commented was at 9/11 in the chat box. I don't know if you did that deliberately, but yeah, hello. I hope you're well. I know I saw some other names in here further down. Thanks for joining us, folks. Thanks for tuning in for a couple of hours. Paula B, hello. I hope you're well. I saw you on, chatted in the chat box in Steve's show on Saturday. And got some tat throw. Hello, mate. I've got to go back and listen to the rest of the Raconteur News afterwards, because I didn't get to hear all of it and it sounded good, so I want to listen. Authentic Human Programming, hello. And Roberto Carlos, hello, mate. In blame for pain, there is nothing to gain. It's an unwinnable game that stems from shame. Yes, right. Your lyrics or poetry, whatever you want to call it, getting better and better, and it's cool. Just that one alone would fit in like a rap song or something similar. And I know there was a few more. Still scrolling down. Got some tattoo. I said hello to you. Your eye colours, hello. I knew there was somebody else. And the helicopter pad, hello, hello. And kudo point, hello, mate. No, don't worry about. You don't have to put stuff in the chat. I'll say hello to people who are in the chat, but that doesn't mean you have to. Don't fall into that group conformity thing. You're thinking you have to comment in the chat. Yeah, you don't have to. If you like just lurking and listening, that's cool. Yeah? Just the fact that you're tuned in and you're listening and you're hearing us talking about stuff, that's really all that it comes down to. And please don't give us or project onto us any kind of authority beyond yourself. Just because we're here on a screen talking about things doesn't mean we're controlling you. Yeah? Think for yourself. Don't believe the hype. Other brands are available. Yeah? You can purchase a lifelong bag in the gift shop when you buy your plastic crap on the way out. Anyway, yes, enough. I'll rant at you again soon, folks. Are you all fakes? Are you fake folks? Oh dear. Yeah. It's definitely time to click the button. I think
Cheers, thank you. Thanks for tonight.
Thanks for joining in, guys. Back on Wednesday night. There's no Raconteurs News tomorrow night there on Wednesday night as well, I think. And Steve will be on Saturday night. And whether there's anything else in between, I'm sure there is. There's plenty of stuff out there. Yeah, Hugh McMahon just put in the chat, Flakes. Yeah. Good night, Flakes. Thanks for tuning in. Catch you again soon, folks. Take care.